Okay, you are good to go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, council, staff, and the general public. Welcome to our public meeting of council in regards to the proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw for Monday, May the 3rd, 2021. I'll call the meeting to order. I can have somebody move in second, please. Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Deputy Mayor Warden. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. Is there any additions to the agenda this evening, Mrs. Healy?
No, there isn't, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Anything from members of council? Not seeing none. If I can have approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Deputy Mayor Warden. All in favor? Motion's carried. Any declaration of continuing interest? Not seeing none. We'll move right into the presentation delegation zoning bylaw amendment for temporary use. Mrs. Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. For the members of the public that are participating by Zoom or by phone, you will be permitted to speak after the presentation this evening. And prior to speaking, please state your name and address for the record. To make a comment, please use the raise hand function and the chair will call on you. Or if you've registered to participate in the meeting by phone, you will be asked if you would like to comment on the application after the presentation. So now I'm going to read required wording under the Ontario Planning Act. This is a hearing under Section 34 of the Ontario Planning Act. Any person may attend this hearing and or make written or verbal representation either in support of or in opposition to the proposed zoning amendment. If a person or public body does not make oral or written submissions at this hearing before the zoning amendment is decided upon, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the Township of South Glengarry to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, also known as LPAT. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a hearing or make written submissions to the township before the zoning amendment is decided upon, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the LPAT unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So I'll move right into our only application we have this evening. This property is located at part of Lot 2, Concession 1, in the geographic township of Lancaster, now in the township of South Glengarry, and is located on the north side of the North Service Road. It is approximately 8 acres in size and is currently not serviced by a septic system or a well. This is a key map of the property. The lines in red is the Highway 401, and the Quebec border is just to the east of this property, not very far. So this is some images of what the property looks like today. So you'll see on here that there is a trailer with a structure on top of the trailer. I believe it's 7.5 feet by 16 feet that's used as a chicken coop. And then this structure in here is used as a overnight cabin. And then this is the south view. I apologize for that being a little bit blurry. And this is coming from the east side of the property. So the subject property currently contains the cabin and chicken coop, just as I described. It was placed on the property in 2020 without approvals, and complaints were received from the public, which resulted in the property owner applying for a temporary use amendment. Sorry about that. So the purpose of the temporary use zoning amendment is to permit the placement of a 12 by 8 cabin to be used for temporary human accommodation and a 16 by 7.5 chicken coop that I mentioned is on that trailer. And the effect of passing this bylaw amendment will permit the cabin and the chicken coop to remain on the subject property for the duration up to 3 years if it's approved. So I want to explain to you what a temporary use bylaw is, because we don't see these applications on a regular basis. So Section 39(1) of the Planning Act allows a local municipality to pass a bylaw authorizing the temporary use of land, buildings, or structures for any purpose set out therein that is otherwise prohibited by the bylaw. For the authorizing of a temporary use, we have to define the area to which it applies and specify the period of time for which the authorization shall be in effect, which shall not exceed 3 years from the day of the passing of the bylaw if approved. And council can grant further periods of not more than 3 years each during which the temporary use is authorized. So for example, if this is approved and it's allowed to be there for 3 years, the applicant is able to return a request for an extension, and that can be granted up to a 3-year period. So the subject property is currently designated rural district in the county official plan, and the proposed amendment does conform to the official plan. And the zoning amendment application will be subject to a decision of council. A staff report, including a recommendation, will be brought to council for a decision in the near future. If this amendment is approved, as I mentioned, the approval will be in effect for a period of 3 years, and you can provide additional extensions if requested. And now I just wanted to explain to you a little bit about what's permitted on this property. So agriculture is a permitted use. However, there needs to be a primary use, such as a dwelling or a barn. And that's why we're here this evening. Is the chicken coop is not permitted to be placed on a wagon. It's usually seen as trying to get around a building permit because it's not placed on the structure. So that's why it was also included in this temporary use request. To date, we've received 1 written comment from the public expressing their concerns of the use and the state of the property. And we ask that all public comments must be received by Friday, May 7th at 4 p.m. And that's all I have for the presentation this evening. I do believe that the property owner is available to speak as well if there's any specific questions for the property owner. So thank you.
Whoops, hang on. Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Saley. Maybe what I'll do is I'll ask the property owner if they do have any comments or questions that they want to ask before. I presume, is it Basil, Joanne? Is that the one that's the owner? So Basil, I'm not sure if you have any comments or questions.
Must be on mute.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're speaking, but you're on mute. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. I find the representation is slightly off the mark, meaning about the cabin being there for the purpose of overnight stay. That's not really the intention here. And the second one is, it's the first time I have that idea coming up of having the chicken coop on a trailer is to circumvent, I don't know, a way of having a structure there. No, not at all. It's more a convenience. It happened to be in a property that I own in Alexandria. We were able to put it together. So how it started. So I just want to make sure that, those been kind of, at least from my side, I like to view it differently.
Basil, if your comment, you're saying that the cabin is not for overnight stay, what is the purpose of the cabin?
Okay, the cabin is mainly came about because I assumed a 10 by 10 or anything like 108 square feet is permitted. And as far as its use is mainly because of gardening purposes, where the person who is doing whatever he's doing there is to leave all his tools and all that. Plus, we were planning to have a well for watering purposes, and thereby we need a structure to keep the well and the pressure tank not kind of get frozen in winter.
Okay, thank you. Is there other comments or questions from the general public? I see Lyle, I just see I see a couple with their hands up. I'll go to them first. So I'll go to there's a call in, somebody's calling in. If you can state your name and address, please.
And you just have to press *6 on your phone to unmute if you're calling in.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for that person, Cynthia James, did you had your hand up? Did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, just a really quick question. So
Can you provide your address, please, Mrs. James?
yes, absolutely. So Cynthia James, 21675 Old Highway 2, Baynesville, Ontario, KOC 1E0. So just first and foremost, I appreciate the owner being here and providing some of his feedback on the proposal. It was interesting to hear his perspective on it as well. One piece that he did mention that I think is important to share is that it seems like maybe there's a disconnect between what the owner of the property understands the individual using the property is doing. Because it does appear that the individual that's actually using the property is in fact staying overnight. So it doesn't seem like it's necessarily just a garden shed.
Okay.
So I think that's an important factor here, that potentially the actual owner of the property isn't fully aware of its use.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. James. Is there any other comments you want to leave with us this evening?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. So I'll go back to the person that's on the phone. Somebody's calling in. So if you want to identify yourself and your address. You're on mute, so I'm not sure if you're on mute, you can hit *6 and that'll take you off mute.
Okay, sorry. Hello?
That's okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I've been trying to unmute. It wasn't working. So my name is Linda, and I'm at 6082 Fifth Line Road in Baynesville also. And a little bit like the previous person said, that somebody does stay over. So if the owner's not aware, he should be aware that somebody stays over occasionally, not every night, but often enough. But my concern is the chicken coop, because I don't agree with animals on a property that's unattended. So we're in a pandemic and people shouldn't really be coming in and out. So these animals would be like left unattended. So that's one of my biggest concerns amongst many others, but that's a main one.
Okay, thank you, Linda. We'll take those comments into consideration for sure.
And there's, like, I know the owner mentioned a well, but at this moment, there's no water source. And if somebody is staying over, like, I worry about waste disposal. There's no septic. So these are some of my concerns.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate that. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Haley, would you mind refreshing what's the difference between this application and a cabin application we did on the, I believe it was the Third Line Road north of Glen Nevis, right near the north end of the township. There was a cabin constructed and it was being brought into conformity. Would you mind explaining the difference to me on that? I meant to ask you earlier today, but I didn't get a chance. You're on mute.
On mute, Joanne.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's actually an excellent question. So in our zoning bylaw, cabins are permitted in the rural and agricultural zones subject to a temporary use bylaw because they're not meant to be typically permanent structures. In the application that you're speaking about that also went through a public process, in working with that property owner, they had a choice to apply for a temporary use bylaw or a zoning amendment to make it the primary use.
Okay.
That property owner chose to apply for the zoning amendment. So that's the difference in the application. In working with this applicant, I understood that he's not 100% sure what he wants to do with this property for the long term. And so we offered him the choice, and he chose to do the temporary use application. I would like to clarify something, Mr. Mayor. In reviewing the application, the request does say permission to have a cabin, including emergency overnight stay. So just to clarify that. And then when you read the definition of a cabin in our zoning bylaw, it speaks to that it's meant for human accommodation. It can't have a kitchen, it can't have a washroom, like there's certain rules around it. It can't be over a certain size. And really, the intent of that is to make sure that our properties are developed with a primary use, as I mentioned previously, either being a dwelling or a barn or an agricultural structure. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the explanation.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. Mrs. Haley, is there any other questions from the members of council? Not seeing none, I'll ask if there's any further questions from the members of the public. Not seeing none. Thank you very much, Mrs. Haley, for the presentation this evening. I'll ask a member of council to adjourn the meeting, if you would, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Warden, second by Councillor McDonnell. All in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. Thanks very much for everyone attending this evening, and we will see council members back at 7 p.m. for our regular council